Call of Cthulhu is another attempt at transforming H.P. Lovecraft's infamous short story into a horror video game, following the story of Detective Edward Pierce as he's sent to the fishing town of Darkwater. Atmosphere. The atmosphere is what you'd expect from a Cthulhu game, to the point of being a bit stereotypical. When exploring the town or underground caves, the four-screen filter and murky ambient music give the game a mysterious, heady feel, like you're being drugged, but spending any time inside the buildings and the atmosphere just sort of dissipates. Even in the darkened mansions you explore, there's not much tension or any kind of eeriness that I remember, it's just a big empty house. The stealth section in the Riverside Institute was the only part of the game where I felt tense, and wasn't for very long. Character animations are incredibly janky and pull me right out of the immersion during dialogue sections, but the biggest problem that damages the atmosphere is just that there's nothing threatening besides some very specific parts of the game, where it was heavily telegraphed that something bad was going to happen. Due to a multitude of reasons, the atmosphere and immersion suffered greatly for me. No Harry Masons. Scares. As previously mentioned, there are only a few small sections of the game where you're in any kind of threat, but even when you should be afraid, Call of Cthulhu misses the mark by making an exceedingly fast and aggressive enemy kill you in one hit, which puts you in a death cycle until you can figure out what you're meant to do for the section, which I found irritating instead of frightening. The game tries to adopt stealth for these parts, but it's not very effective in the small areas you're often trapped in, and on the other hand, I found it too easy to escape the guards in the Riverside Institute, as they move very slowly and don't seem like much of a threat. Ultimately, there's nothing to be afraid of throughout the game, and beware for minor inconveniences. That's still no Harry Masons. Sound design. The dark ambient music that accompanies most of the game varies between mysterious and oppressive, with ritualistic chanting thrown in for good measure, which when it's actually used is very good. Sadly, the music doesn't ramp up too often and you're left in an awkward silence, which is neither creepy nor eerie. The sound effects were sufficient and the use of reverb and caves was nice for headphone users, but it's not really anything special. The voice acting was sometimes at different volumes and some parts of it were lacking in emotion. This didn't help with some of the lackluster character animations that made the dialogue sections awkward, and what should have been an emotive scene turns out a bit robotic. That's still no Harry Masons.
We'll carry on later.
Gore. With the green filter, blood contrasted strongly and really stood out in the game, glistening under the lamplight. The number of mutilated bodies and corpses that littered the game never really stopped being disgusting thanks to the visual style. People were literally torn to shreds in certain places, which was pretty gnarly. Also, the use of needles, early 19th century medicine, and the Cthulhu transformation, there's plenty of gross and disturbing things in the game. That's one Harry Mason.
Oh, God.
Story. Detective Edward Pierce is sent to Darkwater Island on a case to re-examine the claimed accidental death of Sarah Hawkins and her family. Suffering from alcoholism and already experiencing disturbing dreams, Pierce sets sail and arrives on the island, where he is automatically unwelcome. The story claims to be a choose-your-own-adventure with dialogue options supposedly leading to different story outcomes, which if true, may explain why my time playing through the story seemed a bit fractured. There are a lot of sections which stalled the story for no reason, and dream sequences that went on for far too long. Characters were built up and then disappeared, most of the big plot developments happened in cutscenes, and certain character actions made no sense to me at all. The sudden, unexplained ending that I received was ambiguous as to whether it was positive or negative, and left a lot to be desired, making the final score 1 out of 5 Harry Masons. The game tried to do a lot of things with RPG elements and dialogue trees, but the story it was trying to tell was a mess. Its atmosphere was ruined by its fractured story and poor sound design, its mandatory frightening sections were just plain irritating, and the only saving grace is that the ugly green filter made the blood look good. This is easily one of the worst Cthulhu games I've played so far. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion on horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool. I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I stared at the blood for longer than I should have, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching, and always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.